And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2020. As we get started, not a lot to talk about, just a quick announcement that I received a notice from Zoom that in mid-July, they are going to begin requiring us to have a passcode along with the link for these sessions. So that's going to take a little bit of an adjustment. Right now, you can just go on, click my link on the page, and you're in. In mid-July, you'll start seeing a passcode that appears there, and it should be fairly simple. You'll see the link above, the passcode right below, and you'll just enter that in. But it is one more step, so I just want to start getting us used to the idea that we're going to have to do a little bit more than just link in to these sessions. Also, those of you who might be attending for the first time, you'll notice that there are some of the attendees who are in the video stream. In fact, I'm going to hop over there right now. And then you might not be in that video stream. That's okay. You'll still be able to participate and ask questions. I'd just like to invite some folks into the video stream from the get-go so that it feels a little bit more like a community. And then we can add those of you who have questions. You'll be able to raise your hand and ask questions or make comments as we proceed here. So with that, I would like to welcome our featured artist this morning, Lori Reed, who is joining us from Illinois. And I appreciate Lori being able to be here this morning. I kind of reached out last minute to make arrangements for this as some scheduling complications came up this week. So I very much appreciate you being able to jump in, Lori. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Lori, let's begin. First, where exactly is your studio located?
Right here.
Right here.
I'm in my home.
And you're in what part of Illinois?
I'm in Peoria, Illinois, so central part of the state.
Excellent. And give us a little to start your background, kind of in the beginning, how I became interested in art and how you got to where you are today with your work.
Okay. It all started with my grandmother, who upon seeing a piece of my art did that grandmother thing of, oh, Lori, you're going to be an artist one day. So I felt foretold my future. So,
And was she artistic? Are there art genes in the family?
No, but she just was very encouraging of my little drawing of a deer. And so I just kept drawing and doing things on my own. Didn't have formal art training until high school. And my art teacher in high school very much was pushing me to consider going to college in art. So I started in a fine art curriculum and got a summer job as a graphic designer. Loved that. Kind of took a turn and went into graphic design as my major at the University of Illinois and had a very fun creative career doing graphic design. But it was 15 years ago, I believe, I started doing collage work and kind of wanted to work in some of my photography and started running filters on those photos to make them a little more painterly or give them a texture, and was tearing those, working them into the collage. And one day had a light bulb idea of I could run my modified prints through a paper shredder. And that got me into working with this 1/4-inch strip of imagery that I am still doing. So kind of a crazy idea, but it was a way to take it from that documentation of an exact moment in time and pull it into something that was more abstracted, maybe more of a feeling of a memory of a place rather than exactly documenting it.
Okay, good. So let's jump right in then and look at some of your work. I got quite a few comments, and many of the questions were along the lines of what you're just talking about. What is it? How are you doing this? And so let's take a look at the work and talk just a little bit about that. Here we go. So maybe just give us, I mean, obviously, without getting into the the super nitty gritty, but just talk a little bit about your process from the photography to creating the compositions and then executing the pieces.
Okay. I'm always taking photographs. A lot of them are from my iPhone because that's handy. And when I run the filters on them, you get a good quality photo from an iPhone anyway. But I use an app called Prisma on my phone to run a lot of the filters now. And I use my graphic designer skills to make a template now that has cut marks and has the sheet numbered so that I use an X-Acto knife and a ruler, cut the strips out by hand, and then combine generally 3 different variations of that photo in order to vary the hue and the texture and just break it up into some interesting color blocks. I will add solid strips of paper, like in this piece, there's the solid gold in the trees. Sometimes I'll add in maps or bits of text from a book or script from an old ledger. On this one in the upper right corner, I've kind of used road maps of the state of Michigan in this view of Lake Michigan, and kind of I think I did a little watercolor wash over them to make them kind of blend into the cloud in the upper right. There's also some solid green handmade papers in the grass areas, along with those 3 photo manipulations.
And so, and I think I've got the one more here. And talk about the sky in this one. How much of that sky is kind of the original photo, and how much of that are you bringing into the piece from other
It was
sources?
a pretty dramatic sky. So running the filters helped accentuate things in the clouds. And then in the foreground, I've cut up some old postage stamps, and it's a man's head, and I've kind of flipped him upside down so that he's not quite as visible. But on probably about line 4 down from the horizon on the right, you can see his chin and eyes. I think I've got about 8 pieces of postage stamp hidden in there, along with some solid magenta and solid green pieces of paper. So there's a real texture to these as well, because I'm building up the layers, sometimes 3 and 4 pieces of paper deep. So they have a nice tactile aspect to them as well.
And so, Lori, the question becomes, the first question is, this must be very labor intensive. From figuring out the composition and then the cuts and putting it all back together. It seems like there would just be a tremendous amount of work involved in executing one of these pieces. Am I wrong?
No, there is a lot of work. I think my years as graphic designer, and actually starting in the days where you were working at a drawing board rather than a computer, got me into that, ease with labor intensive cutting with an X-Acto knife, lining things up. But it's kind of a meditative process. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with lots of solutions, where you can just keep layering up those strips. And if I don't like how a piece looks, well, I can put another piece of paper on that. And after a career of keeping track of my time to be billable hours,
Yeah.
I love the fact that with this, I just lose all sense of time. And when people ask, how long did that take you? I generally just say all my life. That
My
it took
favorite answer to that question.
it took 3 photography classes from college, design classes to understand eye flow, color theory, and taking the photograph when I'm out on a trip or exploring, then running the filters, choosing which ones I think will work together, maybe overlaying a couple to make a new filter out of their combination, then the cutting, the gluing, the layering up. It's labor intensive, but it's my joy.
Yes, so we're going to take that answer right now, your whole life. But in a few minutes, we're going to come back to it, and I'm going to hold you to account just a little bit more on the time when we talk about pricing.
Okay.
I think that's going to be an important factor. But I do want to talk, as we're wont to do, I do want to talk a little bit about consistency on these pieces. Kind of an interesting discussion. As we always do, is kind of looking at, okay, is the style consistent? Is the palette consistent? Is the media? How does this work tie together? And I think it's a little bit different conversation with your work because of your approach and your method in creating these pieces in and of itself. It engenders a kind of very unique and recognizable look that you can suddenly get a lot more. Oh, yep.
I see someone made a comment and we're hearing a lot of echo on your end.
Oh, let's see what's going on. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
Let's see. Now do we have echo?
You're kind of echoey and garbly.
Well, that
I guess better than you than me.
Hold on just a second. Let me hop over. Yeah, let's just see. Does that help?
No.
Okay. Let's see if I can get some audio going here. Always fun to have a technical challenge, which I cannot explain. I'm going to, this is going to be risky, but I'm going to hop out of the session and come back in and seeing that resets. I'm hoping it doesn't kick everybody out.
Okay.
If it does, we'll just click back on the link. We'll join back in and see if we can get it
Okay.
going. Hold on. Okay, and I'm back. And am I still getting feedback?
You're good.
Yay. Okay. Thank you, technical gods. We'll see. Just give me a sign if it happens again, and we'll see what's going on. I am on a new
I saw
PC
Elizabeth waving her hand and thought, it's not just me.
Yep. Okay, good. So we'll see what happens here, and we'll give it a go. So, getting back on track and talking about the consistency of the work, when you have a concept like this, where you're doing a collage in a way that is very specific and unique, I would argue that then, and Lori, I made you host before I left, and now I can't share my screen. Let's see what we can do to request. Boy, can I make myself host? Well, this will be very interesting if, there we go. That ought to work. Let's try that again. Nope. Let's see. Lori, if you could scroll over your screen, and oh, here we go. I found the right button. I'm going to reclaim host.
You're going to
Reclaim myself. There we go. All right. We'll just roll with it. We're all good. We're all friends. We'll just make it work. There we go. Okay. So, with those strong, recognizable horizontal lines going, and the mix of imagery, you then get the latitude to create and use subject matter basically at will, because that execution and the kind of the concept of the work is so strong that really I cannot imagine any subject matter that you could approach that would cause us to lose the consistency and look of the work. And I think as we look at, let me pull forward and get up to the presentation images. Um, the fact that your format is very consistent, working on panel, and maybe talk a little bit about this format, Lori. What are you using as your substrate for your collages, and how much variety is there across the different pieces?
These are cradled panels. Ampersand makes them, as well as Dick Blick brand. And they have a nice wood edge that I stain. And they have a canvasy surface to give me a little tooth to glue these strips down with matte medium. And then I coat the whole thing with a UV matte medium. I can get these in, I think 1/8 of an inch deep up to 2 inches deep. So I tend to work in like 1.5 to 2 inch deep, so that they have kind of an object feel to them, where they can stand on a shelf or they can hang and
A little bit of weight to them.
right. And I tried working with canvas originally, but trying to keep those lines straight while having that give of canvas added another dimension of interest to the work. So I like this very flat, solid surface to glue the strips down on.
So I'd love to bring some of those of you who are in the panel into the discussion, and just get your reaction to the work. How does it strike you? What's your response to it, and how do you feel about the consistency of the work? I'd love to get feedback, and maybe what your very first impressions were as you were looking at the pieces in the review. And if you would like to join me in that conversation, those of you who are in the panel can just throw up a hand. And I see I got a few of you who are participating who have hands up. So let me go over first. Let me go to Claudia Stewart first. Good morning, Claudia. If you can unmute, we'll get you into the discussion. Oh, and maybe I've lost Claudia. Today's going to be the day of technical challenges, I can tell. Let's try Ellen and see if we can get Ellen in. There we go. Good morning, Ellen.
Good morning.
What was your response as you were looking at the work initially?
It's just intriguing. It's just very intriguing. I love the way the lines are. It just kind of draws me into it. And also, I just want to tell you, I like your Lake Michigan picture, because I grew up on Lake Michigan, so that was meaningful for me. It is so unique. I have never seen anything like this, and I absolutely love it. I do want to tell you, I don't think you're asking enough money.
Yes, we're going to get to that, Ellen, because you're not alone in that sentiment. And so without too many spoilers, we will definitely get to that conversation. Let me hop over and see if I can get Rachel in. Oh, hold on, Rachel. Good morning. Do I have you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I was curious about how you work with the archivalness of the photography and stuff. So is it just the UV medium that protects the photography? And yeah, I'm a painter, so I never work like that. And I just wondered how you work that way.
Yeah, I use laser prints of the photos on acid-free paper. And then the UV coating is just like added insurance that the laser prints are supposed to have, a very long life. But the UV I want, because when I add in handmade papers, sometimes those will fade rather quickly. So the final coat with the UV just kind of ensures that it will have that long lasting effect we're hoping for.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is certainly a question and a challenge for an artist who's kind of, well, let's say, blazing new ground in terms of medium and approach to the work. And how long have you been doing these pieces, and what do you see in terms of the longevity of some of the first pieces that you did?
Some of the first pieces I did not use a UV coating because all I could find was a semi-gloss, and I really liked the matte finish I was using when building the pieces. And then I noticed at a friend's home in their sunroom, a piece that they bought that had some handmade papers in it that I looked at, thought, oh my, that has changed with the
Yeah.
light. I'm gonna have to use
Which they may
UV.
not even really have noticed, right? Because it's happening day by day and they're living with it.
Right.
But you coming back and seeing it, I'm
Uh-huh.
sure was quite dramatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, this is an important aspect of creating work that you're selling to clients, that you want to make sure you're doing everything you can.
Mhm.
We want that work to last, not just a few months or years, but
Right.
decades, and hopefully potentially generations. And so definitely something we should all be considering
Mhm.
with as we're producing the work. So let's jump in then and take the elephant in the room, and let's go ahead and talk about pricing. And Lori, tell us a little bit about what your approach has been to pricing your work. Do you have a formula that you've developed, and how did you arrive at that pricing?
Mhm. I think at first I was just pricing it on how much I liked it. And then I read your book, From Starving to Successful, about how you should do a square inch price. So at first I was doing $2 a square inch, and now I'm doing $2.20. But I have the feeling you're going to encourage that to go higher.
Yeah, I mean, you're on the right track when it comes to kind of how to formulate and think about pricing. I suspect that many artists who are in the early phases of their career do tend to kind of react a little bit more emotionally to putting value on the work. Boy, this is a really great piece. The best I've ever created. I better put a high price tag on that. And the problem obviously with that kind of pricing is that you're too close to the work and can't be objective about really how good it is or how people are going to respond to it. And so I'm always encouraging artists to come up with a pricing strategy that takes that element of subjectivity out of the mix. We just want to make sure that we're not introducing any reason for a potential collector to be confused by the value of the artwork as they're seeing multiple pieces, either in a gallery or at a show, or wherever the venue may be. That they're not saying, "Well, I like this one. Why is it priced lower than the one next to it that I don't like as much?" And so by having as much as you can, a kind of objective, rational formula for valuing your work, you help to eliminate those challenges. Now, having said that, then the next question is, okay, well, how do I come up with that value? And the approach that I typically am recommending is saying, well, go find some other artists who are somewhat established in the marketplace or showing in some galleries or participating in shows that you want to participate in, and see how they are valuing their work, and then kind of put your price points in that mix. Value your work similarly. I suspect that the challenge you would have with that, Lori, is that you're not really going to find someone who is creating exactly what you're creating, or even really very close.
Right.
Yes, you could find other photographers. Yes, you could find other collage artists, but you could see radical differences in the in the process that they're using to arrive at their work, and the time that's going into it. And so I think I would come back and maybe approach your pricing a little bit differently, in that I would want to know how much effort and labor is going into producing pieces. What's my production rate?
Mhm.
And I don't know that I would necessarily be trying to attain some kind of billable hours approach, clocking in as you start a piece and clock out when it's finished. But rather, I would just maybe look for more of an average where you're saying, okay, how many pieces am I producing per month? When I'm at kind of my peak optimal production rate, how much time on average am I spending in the studio? And then try to come up with some kind of, average output, dollar output for my production. In other words, you are ultimately trying to peg how many hours are going into creating pieces and what the compensation is. And then I would look at that and I would say, okay, is that close to where I want to be for my income from producing these pieces? And if the answer is, yeah, I'm not too far off, then, it's a matter of really getting more of the work out there, getting more sales going and building demand. And hopefully it becomes a function of supply and demand. Just kind of instinctually, Lori, do you feel like as you sell this work that the compensation is close to where you would want it to be?
I guess I would like it to be a little higher, especially, selling in galleries is
And
how I tend to move the work or from art shows. And so if it's a 50-50 proposition with the gallery, then would be nice to, I guess, raise
Bump
that
those
price
up.
a little more. Yeah.
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 And
If there's shipping and
talk about your production. How many pieces roughly are you producing, say, per month?
probably 4 or 5 a month.
And kind of in this size range, the 9x12, kind of that.
Yeah, of course, that was in pre-pandemic time when there was also a trip that we were taking the photos to do the work from. But now that maybe a little more dedicated in the studio more, it could be more like 8 a month that I could do at this size.
Yeah. So, right away, that's raising some questions. I think that you could definitely see some increased value and especially with this work, people can see right away. I, as a gallery owner, I'm not going to have to explain to them that this is labor intensive. They can see it, and so I believe that with the quality of the work and with your approach and technique, that you're not going to meet with a lot of resistance of people saying, "Oh, well, I could do that." That kind of thing, because everyone knows, they look at this.
My
and
kid
say,
can do that.
does she have OCD? Has she been diagnosed? And and they can just be amazed by the work that's gone into it, and kind of the beauty in those pieces. Bob, I saw you had a comment or question. Let's talk about pricing. Let me get a few of you in here. Let me get you. It should be asking you to unmute, Bob. If you'll just scroll over, you should see. There we go. Gotcha.
I am unmuted.
You're all set.
Okay. I have a question and comment about her pricing and about her work. I used to own an art gallery for 35 years, and I'm also an artist. So I can talk about the elephant in the room that the artists never want to talk about, which is commercialism. You're driving down the road and you've got a radio on, and all of a sudden a song comes on and you immediately know it's Brenda Lee or Frank Sinatra. I think her work is so unique that you can walk into a room and say, oh, that's Lori's work. And I think that's something that's very much in her favor at this point. And I think her pricing needs to go up.
Yeah, certainly for the scale of the work, I think that $250 per square inch seems very low. As you're thinking about, if you are pricing by the square inch, I advocate for using somewhat of a sliding scale where Your moderately to larger pieces might be at a little bit lower per square inch price, but your smaller works, you can put at a higher price point and it still makes sense. And certainly, it's always a fine balance, right? I don't want to price myself out of any markets or slow down my sales. But I think that what you would find is that actually the opposite would happen in some ways, where some clients really only get that the work is valuable when they see that higher price tag on it. And also, I would say that the other thing that we keep in mind is you can, to a certain extent, you can choose your venues. And so certainly if you're selecting galleries that have a predominance of artwork that is in those lower price points, the several $100 price range, it's going to become more of a challenge to sell the work. But if you can reach out to galleries that are more upscale and in more affluent markets, for them, these price points are going to seem, and in fact, with some of this work, they might look at it and say, well, I love this and it's very unique, but I can't afford to hang this on the wall because even if I'm selling it, it's not generating enough revenue to make it worth the wall space. And so you kind of have to, it's almost a little counterintuitive because we're so used to kind of thinking in terms of value. And often we think with our own wallets and think, oh my goodness, no one would ever pay this much. But we kind of have to step out of that and step away from it. And, again, I say as you get your work out into more venues, I think you would see that there would definitely be a willingness to accept the work at a higher price point. I'd love to get other comments or questions about pricing. I think that's an important one. Anyone in the panel, if you just want to throw a hand up, or those of you who are, I think I've got a few of you. Let me get you up here. Hold on. I see some hands are up over on the other side. Let me go to Gay. I think I've got you, Gay.
Can you hear me?
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me, Jason?
Got you loud and clear.
Okay, because I'm having a very difficult
Oh, and I think I'm
time
losing
with
you,
the
Gay. I
reception on
said
my
that,
end
and
of
then
the
you
whole
cut
thing.
out.
Okay, you said it right. Well, here we are. I know I've got no business saying this, but I
And
looked
we
at
so
her
want to hear
prices
it,
and
but
I
it
thought, my
keeps
God,
cutting
just
out
double
on us,
them.
Gay. I'm afraid we're not getting it in.
Okay,
Let me try one other thing here.
I'll take my hand down and I will chat. There we go.
Okay, perfect. We'll throw it over into the chat. Anyone else with comments or questions on pricing? Okay, I think that the one other element, though, that we need to think about, well, let me ask it this way. First, Lori, most of these pieces are kind of more in that, 12-inch, 9-inch. Have you done work that is at a larger scale? What are kind of some of the bigger pieces that you've done?
Mm-hmm. I've done some in the 18 by 24, and talk about labor intensive.
Yeah.
I run the artwork out on legal size paper. And so when I do a bigger image, then I'm having to tile it out, upper left, center, upper right. And so then I'm, working with maybe 18 sheets of paper all cut into little strips that it becomes a little unwieldy. But I am wondering if I should maybe go somewhere in between that 24 inches wide and this 12 to try just a little bit bigger for a little more presence on the wall.
Yeah, I would. And again, this is something I'm talking to artists that I work with about all the time. Is just whatever your typical range of sizes is. If you can just kind of start pushing the envelope, pushing yourself to do either. For a lot of artists, it is pushing to do some larger pieces. But for some artists, I'm also recommending, hey, could you give me some smaller work as well? But by having a range of sizes, it creates a dynamic in the gallery where clients have a little bit more to interact with. And seeing a larger piece at a higher price point has a pretty dramatic impact on their perception of the value of smaller pieces. You can kind of raise the values of the smaller pieces if there's some larger works there. And so I would recommend that you kind of do that. The other thing I think that I would really be paying a lot of attention to, again, going back to that idea of monthly output, I would encourage you to be thinking about what could I be doing to somehow boost that my monthly production. What are some ways that I could become a little bit more either efficient in my workflows, or at some point do I need to think about having a studio assistant doing some of the labor intensive stuff while I'm guiding the top level creative views? Because I just think that if you're saying I'm producing let's even say 8 pieces at even $400 a month, that total production output just isn't quite where I would want it to be long term. I'd want to be thinking about how could I really start to boost to get my total production into the into the more thousands of dollars per month, whatever the numbers are. I don't like to give hard numbers, but instead just be thinking about how could I take where my production is now and increase it by 25% over the next year, or and just kind of be looking towards doing that.
Yeah.
And again, especially with your work where it is so unique, as a gallery owner, I would want to have a good supply of work on hand. And at these sizes, it also encourages people to buy in groupings. And so, production and inventory is going to be very, very important.
Mhm.
Other comments or questions about Lori and her work or anything else that we've talked about? I'd love to open it up. And looks like, let's see if I can get the chat open here. And I do have a few comments that came in by email as well. Oh, there we go. Let's go back. So Gay's comment was, which I see the chat here, Lori, she says, double them, just double the value. and maybe it doesn't need to be quite that, but you really could think about just giving a real boost. And obviously you've got to think about your current market where you're showing and selling the work, and you don't want to introduce too much of a shock to the system. But in some ways, a time like this where there's a lot of turmoil in the art market and a lot of change can be a good time to make a significant change, so that as the market comes back and starts expanding and growing again, you're in a position, you're repositioned to build on your past success.
Okay.
Bob.
Yeah, I have a question, Lori. If you started working on larger pieces, would you be able to maybe make the strips a little wider to cut down on your labor and still get the same effect you're after?
I did switch to 3/8 inch strips for a while on bigger pieces, and then I went back to the quarter because I liked the variety I can get, the more the sense of movement in the piece. That the 3/8, it just ended up feeling a little more static to me. That 1/4 inch allows a lot more variation in the.
Wow, I didn't even know you were working that small. My God, that's amazing.
Well, that's what the original paper shredder was 1/4 inch.
Oh, God bless you.
Yes, I think that all of us are looking at the work, and again, it's just kind of awe-inspiring to think of you working on these pieces and creating them. I mean, it kind of makes me think of the same kind of skill set you'd need to do the ship in the bottle, or the Tibetan monks who are doing the little sand painting. Just incredible levels of concentration and focus to create these pieces. And yeah, there you go. We and so we want to capitalize on that awe that is created as people are experiencing these pieces, and make sure we're building on that. And as a gallery owner, I'd want to kind of invite them into the process and talk about it. And I really do think that we could look at increasing those values pretty significantly.
Okay.
I've got a couple of other hands that have come up. Let me see if I can get Alexandra in. Good
Yes,
morning,
hello.
Alexandra.
Good
Gotcha.
morning, good afternoon. Good afternoon for me. Do you hear me?
Yep,
Yes?
we've got you loud and clear.
Clear, yes? Or
Yep.
not? Good, good. But Laurie, I have a technical question for you. Unfortunately, I joined a bit late, so I might miss your explanation, but I'm just really curious about the way how you completed. As I understood, you made an image, a photograph, and then you alter it in few different versions, so let's say in Photoshop or having in different exposure or whatever, and then you cut them similar ways, a similar pattern, and it means that you can make as many sets as original as not original, as a variation you have of the photograph. Am I right?
I generally use 3 variations, and I am running the filters in Prisma, cutting the strips out by hand.
In cutting them, every variation you cut the same, absolutely the same way. That is why you can combine them.
Yeah, in other
Um,
words, they're all horizontals,
Yeah.
and so Lori, could you would it be possible to, you're using certain parts of the image across all the pieces, you're using 3 images, could you create 3 pieces, 3 separate
Yes.
pieces using the variations of the strips?
This is a
My
question.
options would get more and more limited because I'm not just using one set of those strips. I'm doing a second layer and a third layer, so that
Gotcha.
every row is broken up by at least 2 variations of imagery. So by the time I get to even a second version, I might be missing all of row number 2 because I decided to, no, I didn't really like that first strip that went down, so I'm going to cover it with another one and then interrupt it with the third. So sometimes
You
I'm
can
left
see
with,
all of us here just really trying to wrap our brain around something that you've been wrapping your brain around for a long time, and trying to think about, okay, how would we do this if we wanted to ramp things up a little bit? I think I've got
So
time for one more comment. Let me see if I can get Sandra in. Good morning, Sandra. Do I have you? Well, maybe not. Let me see if I can go to Bob Gallagher, and then I'll go to Sydney.
Hello.
Oh,
Sorry.
Sandra, I've got you now, and then I'll go to Bob.
Yeah, Laurie, I think your work is so creative, and I love the way that you have not only used your creativeness, but all of your education into something that is so unique and different. What I would like for you to do or think about is putting more meaningful, I'll say pictures, but like you have stamps and you have a face, that I personally would think, wow, now it's just not a piece, I don't know. I think it would bring it up a lot more in interest. And anyway, that's what I would do. So I think
Yeah, and I think there is something to this idea of the initial impact of the work, just seeing the composition and the technique. But then it is always powerful for us in the gallery to be able to talk about, well, each time you look at this piece, there is more to see. The more you explore it, the more you're going to experience and see. And people love that. And, often I hear from my clients that when they buy something that is very unique and has multiple layers and has a story to tell, that's part of the pleasure they get out of the piece is introducing that to folks who are visiting them in their home, or, family and friends who are seeing the piece. And sometimes the family and friend will see something in the work that they didn't even realize was there. And so it just creates this ongoing interaction with the artwork that adds another dimension to the experience of owning and having a piece of artwork in your home. And like I say, that could be very powerful. Okay, let me go to Bob, and then I'll get to Sydney.
Lori, my question to you would be, have you considered doing more of your assembly on your computer, cutting the strips electronically and turning off your different layers, and then just printing out one image? And if you still want to slice it along the lines and glue it on the page, you would be able to probably work much more quickly and get the same effect because you'll be using the same types of filters.
I have considered that and I rejected it because my whole career has been working on a computer screen. And I love that I'm getting my hands covered with matte medium and I'm using a paintbrush and things are, sticking to my hands, and it's this wonderful tactile art therapy.
Almost sculptural in some ways.
Yeah. So I like the fact that it's got that depth of maybe 3-4 pieces of paper deep in places. I have tried doing a digital version where I'm cutting a strip out of this photo and putting it on a layer in Photoshop. And I really like the fact that you get little shadows with a downlight on these because of the thickness. And I just like the hands-on process after being, at a computer my whole life.
In that case, you should raise your price.
Yes.
Okay.
If there's anything that's come out as the theme of this discussion, I think that must be it.
Yeah.
And obviously we want to do it in a measured way, and maybe it's over time, but we should definitely be working towards raising those prices. Because again, just using the very rough calculation, 8 pieces and they're $400. So we're doing $3,200 in production a month. Well, if we could raise that production to $6,400 or $10,000 per month, that's where you kind of want to be moving towards, thinking about in the long term generating good sales. And of course, that helps sustain the ongoing production of the work and your gallery's excitement about showing and selling it. Okay, let me go to Sydney. We're way over time. I'll go to Sydney, and then I see Bob had one more comment, and then we're going to have to call it quits for today.
I just want to say that I was amazed by the work. And I did go to your website and read through the process. So I thought it was amazing. The one suggestion that I thought of was I also take my own pictures for my watercolor paintings. And maybe you would consider taking multiple pictures in the same area where you could put, display them like 3 scenes of the same thing, but from different angles where somebody would buy 3.
Almost creating a series
A triptych
of
or
images,
right.
subject matter-wise.
Where you could sell more because people would say, well, these kind of go together. I think I'll buy them both.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for painting like Michigan. I'm from Michigan.
Oh, wonderful.
We've got some Michiganers here. Excellent. And Bob, you get the last word.
Okay. Knowing now the size of your strips and how many you can do a month, I think if you just go 10% over minimum wage, and you'll be right where you should be. I think you open with a joke and you close with a joke.
There you go. Well, again, Lori, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the work and kind of the process and letting us have this discussion about your work. Really appreciate you jumping into the session.
I appreciate all the input, and I'll be starting to work on my calculation for pricing.
Good. We'll talk, and I'm sure everyone will be kind of following along and paying attention to what you're doing, and we'll look forward to seeing new work as it comes out. Thanks so much, Lori, and thanks to everyone for joining us for today's session. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.